Jeen-yuhs, a Kanye West trilogy, is a 3-part series, hence the term trilogy, right? Streaming now on Netflix. And let me shout out the writers, because this is the Spun Today Podcast, and if I don't shout out the writers, who will? The series writing credits go to Kuti and Jay Ivy. Kuti, who is also responsible for directing and for filming almost everything, if not everything, that we see during this series. And here is the official synopsis. The lives of an emerging superstar and a filmmaker intertwine in this intense, intimate docuseries, charting Kanye West's career, filmed over 2 decades. I always wonder, by the way, and I'm sure I could find this out by a quick Google, but I'm just thinking out loud here. What exactly do those that receive writer's credits for a documentary do from the writing perspective? Because obviously there's no like script. It's not like a screenplay. You know, it's not a novel or a short story or even a nonfiction work or like any of that type of literature. Are they just branded as the writer though because they do bring the vision together and kind of like the story arc that the documentary goes through? Even though that I feel would be accomplished by getting the director's credit. So I feel like the writing credit, there's something else that I just don't know about when it comes to documentary filmmaking. Maybe they're writing like or they're receiving the writing credit based on like the sequencing of how you're going to string together all this footage to tell the story. You know what I mean? I don't know. I got to look into that. Anyway, I'm not the biggest Kanye fan. I'm definitely a fan. Appreciate his music. College dropout, late registration mainly. Hashtag I miss the old Kanye. You know, his production, his rapping ability, whether working with ghostwriters or not. But I'm definitely not the biggest Kanye fan. You know, I'm not one of these folks that believe, you know, Kanye belongs in the Mount Rushmore of X, Y, and Z. I'm definitely not that. But I do appreciate him as an artist, and I am a fan. I'm also, as a podcaster, I watch and listen to tons of podcasts and interviews on like any medium. And I also appreciate and like a lot of Kanye's interviews, and I've seen hours and hours worth. His 2+, or I think he did a 3-hour on Rogan, his multiple-hour sit-down with Charlemagne a few years back out on his ranch in Wyoming. You know, beyond just like the viral clips and stuff, you know, his interviews with Sway. You ain't got the answer, Sway. The scattered TMZ ones, etc., etc. Drink Champs. I definitely don't like when people write him off as quote-unquote crazy. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we put that or, you know, similar labels on people, because it has the power to dilute them to just that when they can be so much more. And I'm not going to pretend to be a psychologist here, although I did minor in psychology and have a DSM manual sitting somewhere on my bookshelf still. But clearly Kanye is going through some mental health issues, some of which he's been open about, being on meds and gaining weight, being off meds, some of which get touched on towards the tail end of the series. But I don't know, I've always, like in listening to, you know, full-length in context interviews for 2-3+ hours, I feel like that gives you, and not just in the case of Kanye, but that gives you the ability to synthesize what someone is trying to say, even if they're not the most articulate, even if they are scattered and all over the place, which Kanye definitely is at times. But that's if you, as the listener, as the receiver, wants to. You know, that's if you give a fuck. If you don't, then it's, you know, easy to be like, whatever, this thing is crazy. He's not saying anything of substance. And again, in taking that approach, you do yourself a disservice, I believe. But what I appreciate most about this series, which I thought was really good and put me onto, again, not being the biggest Kanye fan, didn't know like the ins and outs of his career, just knew more like higher level, you know, produced a ton of music for Rockefeller and Jay-Z. I didn't know he produced half or almost half or more than half of the Blueprint album, which is my favorite Jay-Z album of all time. Yes, over Reasonable Doubt. And I love in general BTS stuff, you know, like behind the scenes type of things. And it could be of anyone or anything. So that made me appreciate this that much more, because his boy Cootie that he met early on growing up was into filmmaking, or like at least at that point in time gravitated towards it, and Kanye leveraged that desire in him to, in one aspect, elevate the perception of himself, Kanye at that time, who was still, a nobody, quote unquote, within the rap game. But having a dude following him around with the camera made him seem like a somebody, I would think. And also having the dual possible outcome of decades down the line, having all this footage to be able to be used to create this documentary, which is dope in hindsight. And I think it shows a lot of different facets of the human condition, of grinding and trying to achieve your dreams, like Kanye was, like Cootie was in his own right, and all the folks we saw that we now know as household names, but we saw them early on in their careers, like Jay-Z, like Dame Dash, like Pharrell, like John Legend, like Common, like Talib Kweli, like Mos Def, etc., etc., etc. And we got to see like a lot of those like nascent stages of that era of hip hop. His relationship with his mother, Donda, rest in peace to her, was definitely amazing. And she was definitely someone you can tell that for all of Kanye's ambition and, goals and dreams and hubris and ego, she was the anchor in his life that like kept him grounded, kept him. And the impact on him of losing her definitely seemed like the impetus of the straw that broke the camel's back to the Kanye that most folks just demonize today. And to that end, it's also interesting to see how, again, within that same vein, but how like the media and just like folks around them in general pile on negatively when it comes to things like his affinity for Trump or his ego, or the perfect example is when he started doing the Sunday service thing and people were damn near calling him a charlatan and trying to take advantage of people. And what the hell is he doing now? But then once it started popping off and becoming popular, like the narrative switched to, oh, he's doing a good thing with his talent. He's being positive. And I don't know, there's just like seeing that, there's just like something like so flippant and like flimsy about that. And I don't know, I guess I say that to say, don't put too much stock in haters and detractors. Even if there's some credence to what they may be saying or some of the things that they say, take what you can from it as like the receiver of those like negative comments and bullshit, and use it as constructive criticism. And if you do objectively see those things within you that you can correct, do so. Like Maya Angelou said in a quote that I featured as the quote of the week in a recent newsletter of mine, spuntoday.com/subscribe. She said, quote, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." Wise words right there. And also on the flip side, that's definitely not to downplay mental illness and issues that Kanye and others are dealing and struggling with. Those are absolutely real things that need and should be worked on by medical professionals, psychological professionals, spiritual professionals. I'm just saying, for us, the audience, the peanut gallery, always seeming to need to chime in our 2 cents about how the other man or woman is doing, it's a disservice to ourselves. And someone within that vein as well is a quote that I wrote down here from the series. And I don't remember if it was Kanye himself saying it early on about the possibility of like him blowing up, or if it was someone giving Kanye advice. And I think it was somebody giving Kanye advice. And I think that somebody was Pharrell, because I wrote down another quote, some words of wisdom that Pharrell gave him, but I didn't attribute this specific quote to anyone. But it says, once a nigga tells you that you're hot, still doubt yourself. And that just speaks volumes to staying hungry, not buying into your own shit, your own hype, which might behoove Kanye to revisit those words of wisdom. But there I go, being the peanut gallery. But yeah, and it reminds me of this saying, which is, you're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. And again, it's within that vein of keeping yourself humble. Now, to something that Pharrell told him in episode 2, when Kanye was pretty much going around, trying to play like Through the Wire and, songs from his first album to people to like get them to listen, literally to anybody and everybody that would give him a second to listen. And, showing that perseverance, annoying perseverance, by the way, but perseverance nonetheless. And just like putting his music in front of people, which Jay-Z actually later tells him when he winds up getting on a verse with Jay-Z. Jay-Z tells him, yo, I never even knew he could spit. See if he wouldn't have said nothing, he wouldn't have been on this song. The squeaky tire gets the oil, which is dope. But anyway, going back to Pharrell. Pharrell tells him something really poignant, which was speaking to his craft and, working on his craft and his ability. Pharrell told him to keep the conduit between those two places clear for that energy to come through. So like clear of all the bullshit, clear of all the outside influence, clear of all the outsiders of people. At least this is how I, took it and interpreted it, of people that are going to be pulling you in different directions and trying to shape you and your narrative and your sound and your creative, in essence, right? Just keep the conduit between those two places, you and that creative place. Keep it clear for that energy to come through. And that was definitely dope. Shout out to Pharrell, man. That's another one that gives amazing interviews. And the last thing I want to share from the Jeen-yuhs trilogy is something that Kuti said at the end when he was thanking God, which was, the answers are always there when you take the time to quiet ourselves and listen to the angels you put in our lives. And again, that's Kuti, who shot all the footage, director, writer, thanking God at the end. And it was definitely a powerful statement to close out the series, and just reminded me of something that I heard Elliot Hulse say once, and I actually have it within the acknowledgement section of my books, which is the concept of there being three types of people that you encounter in life. One is a mirror, which reflects positive and negative things about yourself back to you. Another type of person that you'll encounter in life is a crystal ball, which is someone that's put in your life to show you what your future can become, whether it be good or bad. And the third type of person is an angel. And that type of person is put in your path to steer you or help you see a certain direction. And the way Kuti wrapped up the trilogy definitely reminded me of that. But shout out to Ye, who ultimately accomplished getting folks to know him as from Kanye West to Kanye to just Ye. He distilled his name to a syllable and people still know who he is. And shout out to Kuti and the 20 years of footage that he shot and kept and curated and ultimately helped bring to us. Jeen-yuhs, a Kanye trilogy, is streaming now on Netflix.